Hi, lately everyone has to talk about characters I can't stand, and it seems like everything has already been said about them, but they still allow themselves to act that way. Those things, especially in times like these, just go beyond all limits. Today, we're again discussing Portnikov, who enjoys dividing Ukrainians and wants the conflict to last 30 more years, even though he's not on the front lines. In short, he's very aggressively hostile, because he lives a completely different life, not the one you live, hiding behind his pseudo-intellect. Let's not drag this out. Let's jump straight into analyzing his short segment. Interview. To the highly respected Radio Svoboda, please listen.
Everyone who criticizes Zelensky, and it's not just Russians saying this, all these, I would say, useful idiots, Russians, various Russian-speaking bloggers watched by the Ukrainian audience, are saying this too.
But I won't talk about his good looks again. You can see for yourself. A person who, in everyday life, is actually a Russian-speaking person, who, according to the information and biography published on the internet, moved from Dnipropetrovsk to Moscow, who actually studied at Moscow State University and worked in Russia. I also won't show his photo with Yeltsin again. At that time, he served whoever was needed there. Now he serves whoever is needed here. And in fact, today he is also a Russian-speaking blogger, and you can easily find his Russian-language broadcasts on the internet.
War fatigue among some European and American elites. We saw how difficult the vote for further aid to Ukraine was in the United States Congress.
But when it's a Ukrainian language broadcast and you need to accuse some of your enemies or opponents, it's like, that's them, but I'm a Ukrainian speaker. The most important things are still ahead.
They were also talking about this the whole hour, about some blogger's mother who was sentenced for something. Yeah, I heard something about that. Well, something like that.
What was the blogger's mother sentenced for? Why didn't you mention the reason? She was sentenced for reposting her son's video in which the future of Ukraine is discussed and Russia is not glorified or anything like that. Why didn't you say that? And this highly respected journalist is sitting there, I repeat, from Radio Svoboda, and she's like, yeah, I heard something, I vaguely heard something, but as for Radio Svoboda, I'll explain why it was created, who funds it, and what's next. That's unnecessary. She started shuffling some papers there, you know, like it's no big deal, just a minor issue. There's some blogger, his mom, well, they tried to put them in jail. There's no need to discuss the Zelensky and Yermak regime. We just keep showing Vitaly Portnikov's nonsense, and you see it too. He didn't finish his point.
They're the ones working with American public opinion. These people aren't here, they're abroad. They're working with both Ukrainian and American audiences.
That rat-like smirk again. You know exactly who I mean without me saying it. They were talking about me and Lyubarsky on that broadcast. I won't repeat myself now. You can find what happened on Lyubarsky's channel anyway. Lyubarsky challenged Portnikov to a debate, and Portnikov agreed only if Lyubarsky came to Kharkiv, promising to cover costs. Lyubarsky went, paid his own way, and Portnikov didn't pay anything. He bailed and disappeared. Even though he was sitting there with Bereza, acting like he was ready, saying, I'm me. In the end, no, because he knows he'll lose that debate. Because this kind of pseudo-intellectual crap can only be sold to a dumb audience in Ukraine. He can't tell smart people anything, they just sit there, and I'm emphasizing this for the third or fourth time. Radio Svoboda does things like this. Let me tell you what Radio Svoboda is and what it was actually created for. The first counteraction to censorship in the Eastern Bloc countries, state media in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics were strictly controlled, and access to objective information was limited. Radio Svoboda provided an alternative point of view that was unavailable to local listeners. And this was at a time when I wasn't even a journalist or a blogger. I don't consider myself one, just a person who, like everyone else, has some kind of social media account. I offer a well-argued alternative viewpoint, while they just spread propaganda for Zelensky, Yermak, and nonsense for American money. We've lived to see these times, folks. Also support freedom and independent thought. It aimed to inform people about human rights, freedoms, and democratic values, serving as a voice for dissidents and independent journalists whose work couldn't be published within their own countries. Today, there's a television marathon in Ukraine with heavy censorship. It's pure brainwashing. They're even airing fortune tellers now. When you mention the internet, anything government-funded or supported by grants, Portnikov is involved. He repeats government propaganda and smears people who actually stand for democracy and freedom of speech. That's the kind of disaster we've reached today. Third, the information war was part of the West's broader strategy in the battle for the hearts and minds of people in socialist countries. Radio Svoboda reported on events ignored by official propaganda, like repression, corruption, and economic problems. So basically, I am focused on economic issues and all those things that official propaganda keeps silent about, and the repressions that have already started against me and my family. And instead of talking to me and telling people the truth, Radio Svoboda, using American money, shows the brazen rat Portnikov, who today works for the regime. Of course, if you look at how this is happening, he was recently given the Presidential Shevchenko Prize, and it looks like he's working it off. And what would you call this? Write it in the comments. Fourth, promoting democratic ideals. The programs aim to strengthen critical thinking and inform the public about the benefits of democracy. Well, what does Portnikov do from broadcast to broadcast on his channel and on the air? Radio Svoboda basically, in essence, promotes censorship, dictatorship, and an authoritarian style of governance. At a time when they should be promoting freedom of speech, as I already said, an alternative point of view, and basically capitalist values, today they have turned Radio Svoboda into a Soviet-style outlet. And Portnikov himself is a Marxist, and it's just a terrible time when the American budget is funding Marxists. And it's just thank God that Donald Trump won, and this whole disaster will soon be sorted out, and everything will get back on track. And just so you understand what I'm talking about, I'll tell you about the funding. Voice of America and Radio Liberty are managed by the United States Agency for Global Media, which is funded by Congress. Although called United States Agency for Global Media, it operates independently as a non-profit. And now, what am I getting at? Donald Trump announced his intention to appoint Kara Lake to head Voice of America. And that means, since there's a single source of funding, they'll get to Radio Liberty as well. Because Trump and the State Department, led by Ramaswamy and Musk, will be closely watching where American taxpayers' money is being spent, and I am now one of them myself. So does it mean that American taxpayers are funding Portnikov? And these so-called journalists from Radio Liberty who spread dictatorial propaganda and ignore or mock the persecution of dissidents and other political figures, that's just not a normal situation. And of course, this will have its consequences. I want to give Portnikov the nickname Moscow Komsomolets, considering his past, his current behavior, and the things he says on other broadcasts. They just don't pay taxes and climb all over your head.
For some reason, we're embarrassed to say that Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and other people who won elections for President of the United States or to the United States Congress are not representatives of the Conservative Party. In Europe, they would be called representatives of far-right political forces, meaning they are further to the right than conservatives. This is what, in the 1930s, was called by very specific terms in Italy, in Spain under Franco, and in Portugal under Salazar. I absolutely don't want to just remind you about this here. The far right in North America and Europe exaggerates the migration crisis, fueling people's fears. People in Europe will tell you the same thing. This is a real problem. Liberals simply can't respond to it. And that's why we see the rise of far right tendencies everywhere. Europe and North America are both returning to fascism. Let's state it plainly. North America and Europe are returning to fascist tendencies, just like they were 100 years ago.
America will soon cut funding. But rats like Portnikov, rats are known for their remarkable survivability. They adapt to different conditions. Rats like Portnikov, they will adapt. He has Ukrainian sponsors and masters and will fit in there. Even without American funding, he'll keep spreading propaganda on YouTube and other Ukrainian channels. That's exactly how it works here. That's why it's important for you to understand what's happening thanks to me and other reasonable people, so that the only thing that matters to you is common sense. And not some fool or scoundrel who has read 10,000 books. And you think he's smart just because he throws around some fancy terminology that you don't even understand, but that's not how it should be at all. Common sense should be pointed out to you if you don't want to or can't figure out what's right and what's not, with arguments, concrete examples, and accurate predictions. And this person just sat there bad-mouthing for a year or half a year before the United States elections, Donald Trump. And he was saying that Trump is a fascist. That's it, a catastrophe will happen. It turns out it was done with American money. This isn't normal, and people here in America who should be interested are already paying attention to it. And I've heard that people are already working on this mess to bring everything back to normal, and people like Portnikov and other propagandists won't be funded from the United States government budget anymore. They make things like this. Then he just says, suitcase, train station, Warsaw, and by tomorrow he's somewhere else. This scoundrel divides our people into right and wrong, and then someone claims the war will end soon, only to later admit they were wrong. No, it fell through. You just don't understand. A secret source in Washington told me. I'm hinting at this. Consider who you listen to, who you read, and where your information comes from. I've always given you this example. You see what kind of food you eat because it's important for your health. It's no different with information. Analyze, make an effort, try to figure things out and form your own opinion. Please, I really ask you to write your thoughts about everything you've heard in the comments, and please subscribe to the channel. Bye.